there, my people, and welcome to this episode of the Twilight Zone titled The Jeopardy Room. Peeps, I love this episode because it's not your standard Twilight Zone. It's not science fiction-y, there's no monsters, it's not scary at all. Instead, it's a really good cat and mouse story involving an escaped political prisoner who's trying to get out of the country and the agents sent to off him. Martin Landau, of early Mission Impossible fame, stars as Major Ivan Kuchenko, the escaped prisoner, and he's trapped in his hotel room while the bad guys are across the alley in another hotel room watching his every move through a window. There's an explosive hidden in Ivan's room with a timer, and he's got 3 hours to find the explosive and disarm it, or he's done for. Look, the bad guys are toying with Ivan. They want to mess with his head before they off him. Peeps, this is all about giggles and tickles. They're watching this guy's every move, and they've told him if he tries to leave the room, they'll remote detonate the explosive. Well, that's the setup, my people. Now let's get into the show.
Yes?
Is this Major Kuchenko?
Who is calling?
You don't know me. Wanted you to know that you have friends.
Is this a friend also?
And so the game begins. As you can see, Ivan was asleep in bed when the phone rang. The guy on the other end is Commissar Vasilov, the guy who has been hunting Ivan down. When Ivan asks, "Is this a friend also?" Vasilov tells him, yes, a good friend. Not known to you yet, perhaps, but soon to become acquainted. Then continuing, Vasilov says, "May I impose upon you to remain in your room?" "Why?" Ivan asks. "Why do I have to stay in my room?" "We'll be making contact with you very soon," Vasilov tells him. "Your well-being is our deepest concern. Now may I count on you to show good sense? For your own safety, remain in your room. You'll be seeing your friends before long." Vasilov hangs up, and the scene then moves to a hotel room across the alley. There we see Vasilov and his henchman sidekick Boris in a window across the way watching Ivan. Boris has his gun at the ready.
The fox is in the trap.
Boris takes aim and says, "I can make his head leave his body from this distance." Vasilov says, "That would give you pleasure, wouldn't it?" Boris says, "A great deal of pleasure. Just tell me when. Even when he lies down, I can still aim for his head." "Yes, I believe it, Boris," Vasilov says. "I know your prowess." Boris says, "Just tell me when." Vasilov says, "Oh, put that gun away for a bit." Boris says, "What? Are we not going to off him?" Vasilov shakes his head and says, "The impatience of the bourgeois. They don't sip wine, they gulp it down like a soft drink. They don't sniff the essence of a rare perfume. No, they try to jam it up their nostrils." Boris, "The gentleman will expire. Indeed he will," Vasilov says. "But I want him to expire with finesse, with subtlety, and a degree of thought. That is a good passing." Boris says, "Well, I didn't know there was a good passing or a bad one." Vasilov says, "A good passing is the passing of art. A bad one is the passing of a butcher. You, Boris, are a butcher, and I'm an artist." Arrogant much? Peeps, this Vasilov dude is a real piece of work. He has an assignment, and that's to find and unalive Ivan. But he wants to play with Ivan first. He wants to toy with him. He wants to show Ivan his superiority first, before his end comes. Now, peeps, he's sort of talking down to Boris, but who's the crass one here? In reality, it just might be Vasilov, the high and mighty and the lofty one, Vasilov. Vasilov goes on saying, "You will have your unaliving tonight, Boris, within a few hours. But we will have offed him with artistry and not with a meat cleaver. This unaliving will be like a ballet, a cat and mouse, whereby the intended one may or may not know that he is going to expire." Now, peeps, we see Rod Serling doing something that he's done a few times before, and that's showing up with his monologue once the episode has begun. So, here you have it.
The cast of characters, a cat and a mouse. This is the latter, the intended victim who may or may not know that he is to die. But an ignorance shared by both himself and his executioner is of the fact that both of them have taken a first step into the Twilight Zone.
Peeps, y'all know I love me some Rod Serling, so if I can get him in somewhere, I will. The next scene finds us back at the hotel. The escaped political prisoner Ivan is holed up there. Brother Man has a flight out to a western country where he feels he'll be safe. He simply has to lay low, which is now impossible because Vasilov is on to him. Next, we hear a knock at the door, and Ivan cautiously approaches it, and he takes out his gun. "Yes," Ivan says. Vasilov responds, "Major Kuchenko?" "Who is it?" Ivan asks. "A friend," Vasilov responds. "I'll come in with my hands up. I've got my palms open." Ivan unlatches the door, and he opens it slowly while kind of peeping out with his gun in hand. "Major Kuchenko?" Vasilov says. Ivan says, "And you are?" "A friend," Vasilov responds. "May I come in?" Ivan opens the door wider, letting Vasilov in. Vasilov takes off his hat and coat like he's making himself right at home, like it literally does not bother him that Ivan has a gun on him. Ivan says, "You are the one I spoke to on the telephone?" And Vasilov says, "We had a brief chat earlier." And he takes a seat, making himself right at home, peeps, not the least bit unnerved by the fact that Ivan is following him around with this gun on him. Then Vasilov gets down to cases. "Siberia is quite cold, isn't it?" Vasilov asks. You know what, this dude is kind of a punk. He really is. He's just trying to be suave, but he is still a punk. And Vasilov continues by saying, "I've been told it has a most unfortunate climate." Ivan says, "You've been told right. It's a freezing jungle." Vasilov says, "A freezing jungle? Oh, that's marvelous. Lovely imagery. You know what? I can't wait." Peeps, I can't wait. "Siberia as a freezing jungle," Vasilov continues. "Oh, it must have been unpleasant for you."
Sufficiently unpleasant to motivate you to renounce your native country
and try to seek asylum elsewhere. Which brings us up to date. You were a political prisoner. You escaped. You served a term of 12 years. Ooh-wee, peeps, 12 years in Siberia. And now you arrive here in a neutral country, and you are desperately trying to get an aircraft to take you out of here to a Western nation. But, you feel you are under surveillance? Ivan says, "I know I'm under surveillance." Vasilov asks, Well, do you know by whom? Tell me, who are they? And Ivan says, dude, look in the mirror. I'm paraphrasing, peeps. You remember faces, I remember pain. I remember some interrogations that went on for many months. I remember one particular man who smoked a long cigarette in a holder. He stood in a corner, nodding and smiling, while I went from agony to agony. Vasilov says, now we get to the point.
Did you honestly think we would permit you to book passage on an aircraft out of here? Impossible. As a former member of the military, even as far back as 12 years ago, you possess information that we would find embarrassing to have released elsewhere.
So it's not really to our advantage that you leave here. Of course, it would be simpler and more convenient to accompany me back to our embassy. Dude, you lying through your teeth. That is not your assignment. You just trying to get Brother Man put that gun down. Ivan says I'm sick, tired, and torn, but I'm not insane. I would sooner unalive myself. And Vasilov stands, and Ivan, he gets all jittery, and now he's pointing the gun seriously at him. Vasilov says, gently, Major.
Here, I brought some Amontillado, quite rare and most pleasing to the palate.
I'm afraid I would have to repeat what I said before. I am not insane. I'm quite aware of what would happen to me if I were to drink any of that.
You have only one purpose with me. Why don't you try to get it over with? If you want to disarm me, to get rid of this, he says, talking about the gun, it will take more than a social wine. Yes, indeed, Vasilov agrees. As to my business with you, we both know what that is. I am to see to it that you are unalived by tomorrow morning. Okay, let's get to it. Let's get to the truth of the matter. And you shall be, he says. With a certain degree of immodesty, I can tell you I have unalived 800 times you, but I've done it with subtlety, with interest, and with ingenuity. I am the last of the imaginative exterminators. Ivan asked, and how do you intend to unalive me? Vasilov says,
let's have a drink of wine first, and then I'll tell you.
Excellent. Flavor, bouquet, just the proper amount of dryness. It's really a most exceptional wine. Won't you join me? Ivan says, 'cause he's astute. Very well, I will have a drink of wine. Then I may unalive you. Vasilov says, yes, you may very well try. And I guess, peeps, Ivan feels it's okay. He feels comfortable enough, safe enough, all of that. Because Vasilov is still standing there on 2 feet, he didn't immediately kill over. And I'm Team Ivan, but brother man, I have to call you astute. Because you take the bottle, and peeps, he has a drink from it too. Now, with Ivan having taken a drink from the bottle, Vasilov starts running his mouth, and he says, and now let me tell you something about us. Let me explain the difference between you and me. You are a malcontent, Vasilov tells Ivan. You can never accept that which is ordained. I, on the other hand, I adapt to my situations. I don't have a very large salary, and my job, at least the way it's laid out, is rather a dull one. Find traitors and defectors and unalive them. In your case, Vasilov tells Ivan, I choose to prolong it. And in the process of this prolongation, I have come up with something that I think is a most novel method of unaliving you. One designed to challenge your talents, for we both are worthy adversaries, you and me. And then, Ivan says this, peeps.
I feel very weak. fuck?
Well, peeps, as you can see, the stoop is laid out on the floor. Slowly coming to, he stands. Vasilov is gone, but there's a tape recorder on the desk that wasn't there before. Ivan turns it on, and, no surprise, it's Vasilov's voice. "Greetings, Major Kuchenko," he says. "First of all, to clear up one point, as must be evident to you now, I've been imbibing this particular chemical for many years and have reached a point where I can drink it by the gallon and be quite unaffected. Peeps, he's immune. As you probably perceive, I'm rather a gamesman when it comes to unaliving people," Vasilov says. "I have my own rules and ethics that apply, and Major Kuchenko, listen to the following quite carefully. This is the game, and these are the rules.
You have been asleep for roughly 3 hours. During that time, I have placed a booby trap in this room. It is not visible, but it is attached to a very common object. If you trigger this object, you will immediately be blown up."
Now the following proposition, Vasilov says. If during the next 3 hours you are able to find this device and cut the wire, you will be permitted to leave the room alive. This is a guarantee. You know what? This is a guarantee that this dude is straight up lying. He toying with you. He playing with you. This is like a animal out in the wild that's toying with its food before it eats it.
James, let's not play with our food.
Okay, peeps, I couldn't resist this. Yes, I did watch the Twilight series back in the day, and I read the first book. And this was a one-liner I did like. Alright, continuing. This is a guarantee, Vasilov says, but the following conditions are of the essence, Major. You must actively search for this device, and you must find it and render it unusable. Attempt to turn off the lights, and we'll unalive you with some bullets. I'm paraphrasing, peeps. And speaking of bullets, Boris's gun is a Mauser. That's a German semi-automatic style pistol. If you'll remember, Boris bragged earlier about being quite the expert with it. Vasilov goes on to tell Ivan that the moment you stop actively searching, you will be unalived with bullets. Or if you are unable to find the device at the end of the 3 hours, or if you attempt to leave the room during that time, well, Vasilov says, I'm afraid the same conditions apply. You will receive a bullet to the head.
So, there you have it, Major. As a fellow expert in the art of booby traps, I think you will admit, Major, that the situation has its own special imaginative quality.
Peeps, I can't wait for this guy to get his. He is so arrogant. Arrogant. He thinks he is so smart and so brilliant. And everybody else is a bunch of stoops. And admittedly so, Ivan was a stoop drinking that wine because the first thought that came to my mind was that the guy had some type of chemical in it, and he had built up inside of himself an immunity to this chemical by, having little bits of it and little bits of it and little bits of it along the way. Why did I think that? Because I've seen 101 movies that did the same thing. But apparently, being in Siberia for 12 years, I even didn't see the same movies I saw. Okay, my people, this is straight up cat and mouse. Let the games begin. The scene opens with both parties in their places. Vasilov and his henchman sidekick Boris are in their perch across the alleyway. Boris has a pair of binoculars and he's keeping an eye on Ivan, while Vasilov is sitting beside him, gloating in his brilliance and majesty. To pass the time, because Ivan has 3 hours to locate and disarm the device, Vasilov and Boris are playing a form of hot and cold. Boris turns to Vasilov and says, "The doorknob." Vasilov says, "Interesting idea." And we see Ivan slowly, cautiously turning the doorknob. Then Boris says,
That Bible there looks as if it's been pulled out. Possible?
and we see Ivan himself, first cautiously looking behind a painting and then turning his attention to the Bible, lifting it ever so slightly. Seeing that it's clear, Ivan continues around the room, following some invisible grid in his mind. Some time has passed, and Ivan is still searching the room. Boris says to Vasilov, "You seem so sure that he'll find the device." Vasilov says, "I'm reasonably sure he'll find it, but he'll find it when it's too late." "Is he at the table?" Boris says he's stripping the bed. "That's where you put it, isn't it? In the bed." "Warm now, Boris," Vasilov says, "extremely warm, but not hot." "Then where?" Boris asks. "Please tell me." Vasilov says, "What is he doing now?" "He's at the telephone," Boris responds. "Hot, Boris, extremely hot." "The telephone?" Boris asks. "Precisely, the telephone."
Precisely. The telephone.
But he just lifted the receiver.
Indeed, if on the other hand the Major's phone were to ring and he were to answer it.
That's it. If he picks it up after...
Ah, you've got it now, my friend. The explosion will only occur after the ring and the lifting of the receiver. Major Kuchenko will not even have time to say hello.
And there's the plan, peeps. Towing with this guy for hours, then calling him on the phone, detonating the device. Peeps, Ivan can't find this thing, and he knows he's just about run out of time. But he knows Vasilov has eyes on him, and he'll never make it out the door unless he can obstruct their view of him somehow. So Ivan tries this.
Vasilov! Shoot me!
No, he's not gonna put a bullet in you with you just standing there in front of the window yelling at him. Oh no, where's the fun or sport in that for him? No, peeps, Vasilov wants to best this dude, confirming his superiority. This has become less about offing an escaped defector and more about winning this sad little game. Ivan is now pacing around the room when Vasilov asks Boris, "What time is it?" Boris responds, 10 minutes to 5. Vasilov says he's got another 10 minutes. Peeps, the 10 minutes pass and Vasilov says, "I think it's time to implement the thing." And he reaches for the telephone and calls Ivan's room. Ivan goes to pick it up, but he stops, and we can see him thinking. Peeps, Brother Man has figured it out, and he doesn't answer the phone. Ivan appears to be ready for the second ring because he's standing closer to the door now. When the second ring does come, Ivan springs into action. And Ivan escapes and is once again in the wind. Well, there's nothing for Vasilov to do right now other than to view the wreckage and talk some smack about catching Ivan later. Boris holds up the gun and says, "It would have been better, wouldn't it?" Meaning, it would have been better for him to have taken Ivan out earlier, when he had him in his sights. Forever arrogant, overly inflated, and puffed up, Vasilov shakes his head and says,
It's all right. I'll get him in the next city. Now that I know that he is a most resourceful adversary. No!
I'm sorry, sir. The line seems to be disconnected.
It's all right, operator. I have reached them.
And Rod Serling ends this episode with these words. Flight 17, Transocean Airways, now departing for New York City via London. Major Ivan Kuchenko is on his way west, on his way to freedom, a freedom bought and paid for by a most stunning ingenuity, an exit one Commissar Vasilov took when he forgot there are two sides to an argument and two parties on the line. This has been the Twilight Zone. And there you have it, my people, the Jeopardy Room. Peeps, Ron Serling wrote this episode, and I love the spy angle, the cat and mouse, and the how are you going to get out of this room alive. Sure, some might say it's a little cheesy, but for a 23 minute story, I found it to be pretty good. I love small sets and having to tell a whole story in literally one room. I think it adds to the suspense and the tension. Peeps, another great Twilight Zone one-room episode is Nothing in the Dark, starring a very young and really handsome Robert Redford. And peeps, it's on my playlist, so go on over and check it out if you haven't already seen it. Folks, Martin Landau was excellent. His character was intense and desperate because Brother Man definitely didn't want to get captured or offed. The Vasilov character, played by John Van Drelen, was cool, arrogant, and menacing. Peeps, I dare say, with the slightest pinch of evil. All in all, both actors worked their role, and worked them very well. Well, peeps, that's all for now. To my subscribers, thanks so much for committing to the channel. And to my viewers, I so appreciate you as well, and please do consider subscribing. To all, please give me a like to keep the channel moving, okay? And do feel free to leave a comment, and I'll chat you right back up. Now y'all stay healthy, be kind to one another, and mindful of your own needs. I'll see you next time.